Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. First off the bat, there's some breaking news. There appears to be a deal, a big bipartisan infrastructure deal. Believe it or not, a few hours ago, a group of 21 senators announced it. I got to tell you, it came a bit as a surprise. Earlier this week, it seemed like said deal that we heard about a month ago was likely dead. It appears that's no longer the case. The huge $1.2 trillion deal appears to be happening. In fact, we're going to have Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg on to talk about it. He has been a big advocate for that piece of legislation. Now, the ex-president is furious about the deal. He's screaming into the darkness about how Republicans are getting played, though crucially never offers a single substantive critique of the contents. But of course, that's the way he views everything, as zero sum. Everything is someone winning and someone losing. Someone is getting screwed and someone is doing the screwing. It's a cold, very sad, cynical way to view the world, but it's also come to dominate the entire conservative movement. Because these days, a big part of the appeal of the conservative movement is the transgressive thrill of being a jerk, of being cruel, of mocking people and deriding them when they are in pain or suffering or having a problem. Now, the thing is, everyone in life encounters people who are jerks. Part of life. Might be a coworker, might be a friend of a friend. Some people have family members that are jerks. It happens. We all deal with it. That is one thing. Elevating that, being a jerk, being cruel, into a defining feature of one's political movement is another thing altogether. Now, this, of course, was Donald Trump's superpower, right? Because it is what the base loved about him and also what he loved. I mean, being mean, even when he was going after his own conservative supporters.
A year ago, you told me on my radio show, the audio and the transcript are out there on YouTube, that you would release your tax returns. True. Are you going back on your
No, I'm not.
commitment?
First of all, very few people listen to your radio show. That's the good news. Let me just tell you, which happens to be true. Check out the ratings.
No, he did stuff like this all the time. What he learned, particularly among conservatives like Hugh Hewitt there, is that they would just say, thank you, sir, may I have another, and never really stick up for themselves. And he's just kept doing it over and over. The nasty insults, the vile behavior, the mocking of a reporter who's physically disabled, on and on and on, right? We all know the catalog. As Atlantic staff writer Adam Serwer wrote in an essay back in 2018, that's now the title of his best-selling book, The Cruelty is the Point, Trump's only true skill is the con. His only fundamental belief is the United States is the birthright of straight white Christian men, and his only real authentic pleasure is in cruelty. It is that cruelty and delight it brings them that binds his most ardent supporters to him in shared scorn for those they hate and fear. Immigrants, black voters, feminists, and treasonous white men who empathize with any of those who would steal their birthright. The president's ability to execute that cruelty through word and deed makes them euphoric. Pretty on the money. I mean, yesterday, we were served up two perfect examples on full display. The first was this incredibly emotional testimony at the Select Committee investigating the Capitol attack of these four officers who faced brutal violence on January 6th. And in the case of Capitol Police Officer Harry Dunn, a slew of racist epithets. Those officers spoke with incredible poise and courage and emotion about what they faced that day.
Being an officer, you know your life is at risk whenever you walk out the door, even if you don't expect otherwise law-abiding citizens to take up arms against you. But nothing, truly nothing, has prepared me to address those elected members of our government who continue to deny the events of that day. And in doing so, betray their oath of office.
The sea of people was punctuated throughout by flags, mostly variations of American flags and Trump flags. To my perpetual confusion, I saw the thin blue line flag, a symbol of support for law enforcement, more than once, being carried by the terrorists as they ignored our commands and continued to assault us.
Can you tell us what you were thinking when you were losing oxygen and thought that might be the end?
My rationale there, and the way I was thinking, is like, we can't let these people in no matter what, even if it costs my life.
Once the building was cleared, I went to the rotunda to recover with other officers and share our experiences from what happened that afternoon. I sat down on a bench in the rotunda with a friend of mine who was also a black Capitol Police officer and told him about the racial slurs I endured. I became very emotional and began yelling, how the blank could something like this happen? Is this America? I began sobbing, officers came over to console me.
After watching that, I sincerely hope that even if the point those officers are making did not directly align with your politics, some part of you, some decent human part of you, would recognize this was genuine pain. I'll speak for myself for a moment. I remember walking into the Republican National Convention in Cleveland in 2016. It was the first night of Donald Trump's convention, and it was Benghazi and national security were the focus. And I was in there on the ground floor, and on the stage there was a woman named Pat Smith, the mother of one of the people who died in the 2012 attack on the U.S. consulate in Benghazi. And she was up on that stage recounting her suffering at the loss of her son. And I remember feeling awful for her. It was hard not to feel that when someone in your presence is in obvious pain. And while the politics of it all seemed manipulative, at no time did I feel compelled to ridicule this woman who was obviously suffering a grievous loss. I mean, I had a TV show at the time. I suppose if I were a real sociopath, I could have, but it never even occurred to me. But that's not what the conservative movement in the MAGA era is all about. Mocking people for their loss, for their pain, is a huge part of the point. It's why they're doing it. So not surprisingly, this is what we saw last night.
Watch Fanone cite the psychological trauma he endured as an excuse for ditching our Bill of Rights.
I've been left with the psychological trauma and the emotional anxiety of having survived such a horrific event.
What's interesting is that Michael Fanone didn't mention experience any trauma during the time he spent last year on the D.C. police force.
Now, the award for best use of an exaggeration in a supporting role, the winner's Aquilino Gonell, who thinks the pen is literally mightier than the sword.
You have all these items and things that were thrown at us and attack and used to attack us. Those are weapons, no matter if it is a pen.
The award for blatant use of partisan politics when facts fail, the Engel Award goes to Capitol Police Officer Harry Dunn.
I'm a law enforcement officer, and I do my best to keep politics out of my job. But in this circumstance, I responded. Well, I voted for Joe Biden. Does my vote not count? Am I nobody?
We have more on him in a moment, but it's not about politics at all.
Now, keep in mind, the people directing criticism here are some of the most privileged and cosseted people on earth. I mean, Donald Trump is the perfect example of this, right? The thoroughly mediocre legacy case who basically inherited everything from his daddy, including, millions of dollars in the myth of being self-made. Or Tucker Swanson McNear Carlson, a prep school frozen food heir from the mean streets of La Jolla. I mean, they certainly never faced anything like what those officers faced on January 6th. But it's not just those officers yesterday that were mocked and ridiculed. There was, of course, in the same day, the news about Simone Biles, the four-time gold medalist and perhaps the greatest gymnast ever. As you probably know, Summer Olympics happening in Tokyo, Japan. I've been watching and enjoying quite a bit. Biles withdrew from the competition. She did this yesterday after coming down awkwardly during her signature event, the vault, where she kind of lost her place midair and was hurling herself in a way that could be physically catastrophic.
Feel good. I'm in shape. Emotionally, that kind of varies on the time and the moment. Coming here to the Olympics and being the head star of the Olympics is not an easy feat. So we're just trying to take it one day at a time, and we'll see.
So Biles withdrew from the team finals. In fact, it probably helped her team, which won the silver medal. She announced she will not be competing in tomorrow's individual all-around competition because of this mental health issue. Now, a lot of people, including myself, are disappointed she will not be competing, but also feeling empathy for her because, well, she's an incredible figure, and obviously she's in distress or she wouldn't be doing this. For others, it's just another opportunity to find a way to mock and ridicule and to monetize someone's pain in a moment of weakness broadcast all over the world.
We are raising a generation of weak people like Simone Biles. Again, if you want to be If she got all these mental health problems, don't show up. She's an incredible athlete. Of course she's an incredible athlete. I just said she's probably the greatest gymnast of all time. She's also very selfish. She's immature, and she is a shame to the country. She's totally a sociopath.
That guy's talking about weak people. Weak people. Right. There is little about that rant surprising. I mean, conservatives understand which side their bread is buttered, so they love nothing more than to rail against prominent black people and try to tear them down because their audience eats that up. I wonder why. I was not even that surprised, honestly, by the mocking of police officers that we saw, although it's a little surprising in some ways when you think about it. But when you build a political movement whose emotional core is transgression and cruelty, ultimately, no one is safe from that kind of treatment. You know, ask Hugh Hewitt. So what kind of governance will that lead to the next time that these folks get power?